Hello and welcome to Rule of Carnage. This is a series of conversations about designing better miniature games. And here you will find a conversation between me, Mike Hutchinson, designer of, in this case, SPACE GITS, and Glenn Ford, another fine designer of miniature games and co-host of this podcast. We didn't record any video for this podcast, so you will find it is an audio-only presentation. In this conversation, we discuss some of the finer details of my final rules development stuff for SPACE GITS. I'm in the final stages of tweaking and polishing before I commit the game to Dead Tree. Please enjoy this long-form design discussion conversation between me and Glenn. All right, let's talk about SPACE GITS.
Contemplating the end of the game.
Yeah. Your comments were useful. It's weird because, like, as with many of the things that I'm currently considering, like, none of them are fundamentally broken. It's just a little bit of, like, going around with a tack hammer, just seeing if there's a nip or a tuck.
Yeah.
And with the Leggett game end thing, like, I guess one thing I'm conscious of is the multiplayer-ness hasn't been tested by me enough. So your idea of, like, one first player out ends the game, I think is just really nice. That's the sort of thing that Gaslands ought to have as well.
Yeah, because the thing is,
and particularly in this game where it's like it's 30 minutes, it's like panic. Oh, it's over. Let's play again.
Yeah, and I think, and because the thing is, you've got sort of three things that are sort of pulling the different directions. There's the multiplayer factor, and then there's the one-off game versus campaign game factor, you know? Because it's like the main thing about the main reason you'd be sort of driven to leg it is injuries, you know? And I feel like you don't want to just force people to stay in on a one-off game. If, like, everything sort of, it's basically resolved, it's kind of over, you know, you're willing to say, yeah, look, you've clearly won, there's no point sort of dragging this out. But then in the campaign game, because there's injuries, there's an extra impetus to leg it at certain points. And you don't want to sort of allow people to leg it to avoid injuries too early, but you don't want to put at the same time too much pressure on people to sort of to be held in there and just sort of get degraded and run down. Yeah,
and like the injuries, you know, much like the injuries in this game are mostly like fun, flavorful, you know, semi-beneficial nonsense, deliberately so. But people will come in with more time Necromunda, like, loss aversion assumptions about injuries. So to a degree, like, I have to be a bit cautious about the way that, like, I allow people's preconceptions to hook into the Leggett system or the Call the Cops system or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I think I said in the Discord, I think I would be a fan of all the injuries being either neutral or beneficial.
Yeah, no, I don't want to do that, but it doesn't really matter because either way, like, they're mostly beneficial anyway. So the problem that you're stating, I agree with and doesn't exist in this game. And the other thing is that, like, it's not, even though the problem has been eliminated, it's not going to stop players behaving as if the problem is there.
I know what you mean, yeah.
So it's fine. Like, the injuries are all written. That part of the system's great. The question really is, like, so I think one of the things that you stated, which I've been thinking about all morning, was you saying, I'm not sure there's any reason to let people leg it in a 1v1 game, which I think there's a couple of reasons to allow people to leg it. One is the sensation that the game is under the player's control rather than an automatic trigger for game end. And that isn't, like, that's not a stone cold, you've got to have one or the other, like, both are valid. But I think that's one of the reasons that I put it in, is I like that feeling that, you know, the players get to decide, or at least a player gets to decide when the game is over. rather than, triggering when you've got the majority of the caps, and then it's a race to the majority of the caps, which, equally would be fine. Like, that's an exciting race to do the core activity, which is picking up caps. And the other thing is that if the trigger is about, if the way that a player gets eliminated is by having all their gits down, then the game is, mostly about punching and shooting the other people until they fall over. And there isn't a way to just be like, haha, I've stolen enough and I'm running off into the sunset. And the second one feels more in keeping with the theme of the game, rather than it being just, because it's not just a brawl thematically. It's a bit weird because in this game, unlike most, like I can lose models through my own clumsiness, which adds a nice spice to it, which means that even if the game is about kill the other team, it's not about kill the other team. It's about kill the other team as much as you can whilst not fumbling your own team members.
Yeah.
But I think that's why I'm still keen on. That's why I like the Leggett system, is that it's player controlled and it's thematically linked to looting and scooting.
The thing is, like, there's always going to be an emergent Leggett system in that I can just flick over all of my own dice towers. I can always self-eliminate because all of my gits will be downed, and therefore. I know.
And
therefore.
But only a certain kind of player will choose that option. So it's not really an emergent property of the system. It's a partially emergent property of the system for a class of player.
Yeah, I guess the thing is, like, putting that Leggett is an official offering to you, when it is functionally the same as just flicking over all your own dice towers and going, okay, let's end the game here.
Right. So yeah, I guess that's right. Is that it softens the fact that there is always that like hidden option. And then it makes it always official and completely above board. Yeah,
well, I just mean it's like there's sort of no point entirely removing it because it is always going to be there.
Yeah.
By removing it or not removing it, all you're doing is sort of
offering that's a good point.
Is how you offer it or don't offer it to players. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I see that point.
So it's like it's in there either way. Your choice is just to say either this is something that a certain sort of person we're a bit down on plays versus this is just an acceptable thing you can do if you're like, it's
yeah, and to be clear, I'm not down on that kind of player. It's just that some people will not consider that option, and so therefore it creates an imbalance.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right that there's always the chance that I'm going to fumble my move with my last guy. And if I, as I have done many times because I have to do it in demo videos, if I deliberately fumble that in a way that looks real, then who's to know?
It's totally between a sort of like the person who tries to make it look accidental, the person who goes, okay, I'm not making it look accidental, I'm being fully open with you, I want to now end the game. And the person who will do neither of those things and therefore is sometimes...
And feel stuck.
Yeah, forced to be stuck and grind out. And Leggett just goes, none of you need to worry about those personality types. This is just an option. You don't have to pretend. You don't have to go, I'm emergently...
Yeah, so that's interesting because your point about the call the cops when you've got 51% of the caps, like... Yeah, that just always exists if the game eliminates players with all downed models. And the game does right now eliminate players with all downed models regardless of when in relationship to the timer that they end up in that state.
Yeah.
So that slightly face-melting problem does always exist.
That's what I mean. It's there either way. And you've got to let people be eliminated when all their models are downed because obviously it's just unpleasant and painful otherwise for them.
Yeah.
And you want the whole game to end when one player is in that position so that they're not like forced to wait an extra 15 minutes to have fun again. it's just then like leveling out the fact that, like I say, what I guess is the current system of you get caps for every nearby downed person at the end, turns downing every opponent's orc into that sort of like, it's such a swing that you want a game end condition and a victory condition that aren't necessarily heavily linked together, because at the moment it's sort of like, if you end the game, you win the game, you know. Like I say, I put it like, it's like the golden snitch in Harry Potter, where it's like, well, there's no point playing the main game in Harry Potter, just catch the snitch. It wins the game and ends the game.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't want that to be the case. And I think the siphoning caps out of every single like downed enemy is such a swing that it ends up functionally being win the game a lot of the time.
Yeah, if you're playing anywhere near close to evenly picking up caps, then it's the thing that...
Yeah, if you casually pick up caps that because they're just in the way of where you're moving, whilst trying to down the enemy, when you down all the enemy, you will be within enough caps of them that will just win the game.
Yeah, and I think that as I itemised out all of the negatives, all of the punishments that I've placed on legging it, like it became clear that there were a lot of stacked negatives. And I think that was just because like I felt sure that choosing to leg it has to be a decision with a consequence. I just added quite a lot of consequences, and some of them are less emergent, like the having to replace your dudes with caps is quite that's quite an on the nose solution, whereas the other guy gets to pick up all the in play caps is a much more emergent punishment where it's more dependent on the table state.
Yeah, and by and large there will be relatively few caps on the table. I think by and large it will tend to be that there will be fewer caps on the table than you will have down boys on the table, you know? Because you're picking up caps as you're playing, you have to sort of go out of your way to not pick up like a decent number of them.
Sure, I guess that's true towards the end of the game. Like one of the questions here is whether, it's like what happens on the first two activations, and how does the game not just crap its pants?
Yeah, but like I say,
the point is that there's going to be a swing because we've both got some caps. When I choose to leg it, you get more caps. So the swing is there. Me having to put some caps down, which you then also get. It's like a triple dip.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing, because it's taking them out of my supply, putting them into your supply, and it ends up being such a swing that I'd have to have picked up over 75%. If there's 12 caps and I pick up 9 of them, it's a draw. If I've got like 3 gits, which is a huge swing. Which feels way too much. And I don't think like the thing of like the picking up the caps are on the table is it means that the 1 or 2 activations and the legging it thing becomes a non-thing, because there are 10 or 11 caps on the table. You're only ever going to want to leg it tactically when you've at least picked up like 7 of the 12 caps,
Yeah, and I think actually to return to the campaign versus one-off thing, like there's a much more positive reason for choosing to leg it versus not choosing to leg it, which is the more caps I have, the more cool shit I can have. And so if I get to 8 caps, if I get to 7 caps, I could choose to leg it, but I might be leaving a few caps on the table that I could have got if I'd have played well and then legged it. So that's a impetus not to leg it at the 10-minute mark.
Yeah, and I think if you play until you've picked up 7 caps and then leg it, you've had a fairly decent game. There's been back and forth, etc., etc. I don't think that that's like, oh no, people will get to.
I agree. Yeah, like picking up 7 caps is a thing that I sometimes achieve, rather than like, oh well, that's only halfway through the game.
Yeah, and also it's sort of like picking up 7 caps and then being in a position where it's a ball ache to maybe get the remaining caps, or you've already got most of the other caps and going like, well, it's fine to end this. You know, I don't think is a sort of cold, cynical.
So that, I guess, is another thing, which is, as the losing player in a campaign game, I could still want to leg it, even though you're going to win the game, because you could pinata more of my caps out of me if I chose not to leg it, and so I'm going to have a lower loss in the campaign if I leg it now, rather than letting you kick another 3 caps out of me.
Yeah, if I've got only 1 standing git and all of your gits are standard, and you know I've got 5 caps and you've got 7, I want to leg it at that point.
Yeah, you'd lose the bonus for winning, which I can't remember what it is right now, but but yeah. So what does that leave us with? So that leaves us with leg it is still fine. I really like the switching to first player out triggers the end of the game. That feels totally fine. And then it's just reduced to yes, I think it's just what I said here. I think it's this system.
Yeah, I mean, like I say, the only semi problem with that is someone getting to, you know, a winning number of caps and choosing to end the game, which I don't think is a big enough problem for that to not be the end out point, because it's like, sure, competitively you're turning it into a race to 51%, you know, or depending on the number of players, caps. But that's not the worst thing in the world. Yeah,
and the fact that everybody gets 1 more activation means that you've got to call it in a situation where you're at 51% and you think you can survive another 1 activation or 2 activations or however many players there are.
It's 51% plus 1 cap per other player to be absolutely guaranteed.
Yes, yeah.
You can,
unless they've got like the special ability that lets them kick D3 caps out of you or whatever.
Potentially, yeah, but at that point it's getting very sort of.
Yeah, okay, so it is calling the cops and ending the game. Feels like the right answer. Yeah, because I think that what the points you raised, I think we've ended up getting comfortable with the idea that the problem always exists.
Yeah, the issue is unavoidable.
So it's better. Yeah, so it's better to have the.
It's an inevitability because of the nature of the system.
Yeah, and the reason I'm calling it "Call the Cops" is that like now that my decision to leg it triggers the end of the game for everyone. Like I want a thematic framing for like why me running away suddenly stops the fun. Like, do I take the ball home with me? Like what's going on here?
Yeah, it's not I'm just legging it. It's I'm doing something that's going to mean that the fun is over and it's going to be calling in the authorities because
those guys are robbing.
Yeah, I'm so beat down that I'm like. You've got the Gaslan's Beetle.
Yeah, I built it in 32 second scale, which they look like. I don't like miniature scales are so fucking weird, but like that's completely perfect. It's such a good scaling.
Yeah, I mean scale creep, has been going on for so long that minis aren't 28mm anymore.
Oh no, not even vaguely. Yeah.
Yeah.
So. Like, I think that this guy is, broadly speaking, a 40mm model at this point. Like, compared... Because, like, the 1/32 scale, I think, is closer to 40mm.
Yeah. No. Yeah.
And this, like, looks small compared to, like, like the Orc buggies or the one that you printed off from Module Orc. Like, that's massive. It's, like, twice the size of this. And like, yeah, probably like this guy could probably it'd be a real squeeze inside this like toy car, but it looks better on the table.
What's weird is that scale creep has been going on forever, but for example, GW hasn't then done table or movement size creep to match alongside it. It's like there's a bit in Rick Priestley's book where he talks about the fact that the thing that is going to end scale creep is that there's going to come a point where you can't move from one end of a vehicle to the other in like a single movement, because you still have to have tables no bigger than 4 foot by 6 foot, vehicles, so you can't suddenly have people doubling, you can't double all the movement rates. It would ruin the game in relation to the table size. That's a fixed thing. So if you get to a point where somebody like gets out of their car and then takes like 5 minutes to get to the back end of it because it takes them like 2 or 3 moves because the scale's so big, that's like, they can't get any bigger than that. There is an external limit on scale creep, which is the size of people's houses and tables.
Yeah.
I don't think they're far off it at this point. Endless growth is never sustainable.
That's a political statement.
Yeah. Yes, indeed.
One other last point on the game end Leggett stuff is that, like, ultimately the most new caps acquired is, and I haven't decided whether to like actually officially do this, but like there is a scenario 0 called, Riot Party or Pennies from Heaven or something, which is the one that is in the book. And then later there'll be lots of other scenarios which will have different setup and different victory conditions. So the victory conditions of having the most caps, like, I can just override that in any subsequent scenario, or I can gather these things together and say there is only one scenario. It's called Pennies from Heaven. Here's the setup. Here's the victory conditions. I think the Leggett, what I'm trying to figure out, and I think I'm reasonably confident is the Leggett rule part of the core rules or part of Pennies from Heaven, the scenario 0? Because if it's part of the core rules, it has the like possibility to fuck up all subsequent scenarios. Whereas if it's completely optimized for the use in this scenario, then maybe it's just a scenario rule that ends up appearing in a fair number of scenarios. But like if we have like a running round a racetrack situation, or like a supermarket sweep, or like, or like a British bulldog, like none of these things, it may be that the dynamics of Leggett are completely wrong. And so I think I need next week to just go through and like write some of the scenarios that I've got in my notebook, write them up, and then having reached this point, decide, like analyze, does Leggett function as a core rule or not?
Yeah. Yes, that is worth considering. I mean,
which I've not really had that problem before, because like obviously scenarios are important. Obviously the scenarios are the thing that break your game, but like not knowing if something's a core rule or a scenario rule, that feels kind of new.
I guess the thing is, it's like it's to do with the sort of, like I say, a bunch of emergent properties in SPACE GITS. Because it's this weird thing where you can always self-eliminate.
Yeah, because you can't kill yourself. You can't seppuku in pretty much any other miniatures game.
No, there's basically no other miniatures game
other than walking off the table, which is obviously why walking off the table makes everything hard.
But you can't. But you can't walk all of your minis off the table in between activations. It's not even an activation. Self-eliminating in SPACE GITS.
Yeah.
It's an outside of activation action where I can go. There we go. That cost me 0 AP.
To flick all the towers over.
Yeah, so you've got this thing where self-eliminating is outside of the mechanics of the game, which is which is completely insane and weird. You can't, you don't have a step for saying, where and when you self-eliminated, and no other game sort of has that problem. You can't. Even in games where you can normally self-eliminate, you have to spend an AP to do it,
Yeah.
And so that's why SPACE GITS has.
And so so this will be proven out next week. Maybe that might be an explanation of like why the Leggett rule needs to exist as a core rule. Is it's a corollary to the like the modality of having dice towers.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think Leggett has to be a core rule, and then you have to make the scenarios work with it. Because you say Leggett is not in every scenario, then all those other scenarios have the
problem.
emergent self-elimination problem.
Yeah.
And then if you write those other scenarios to not work if someone self-eliminates, they won't work because you have emergent self-elimination.
Yeah.
So I think Leggett has to be the thing that you write to rather than the thing that you decide not to include. You know.
Yeah. Whereas like most caps is the winner feels completely like tertiary to the core game. Because it's entirely possible, and I almost certainly will write scenarios that have 0 caps in them.
Yeah, I mean, most caps wins is fine as a win condition, but it's not a particularly sexy win condition. It's not a thrilling or fun win condition in and of itself. It's like
no.
It's fun because this is a basically fun part of the engine. But it doesn't make you go, ooh, tactically interesting. You go, yeah, I mean, sure, of course. It's either like most caps or most enemies killed. It's a default. It's clearly a default win condition.
Yeah. What's the other things? So I want to have a quick look at the vehicle fighting rules, okay. Just because they need to be a little bit more tested. Because I flip-flopped around with like whether or not vehicles start fights, and I have a system now which I think has fewer rules exceptions, so that's nice. So I want to test that. The 1-inch pinch, which I think, having discussed it and gone around the houses, like I was never that bothered by the swapping caps thing. It's just like it's one area like. It's funny because like I'm always on the lookout for no-ops and backwards movement and stuff, and this felt like one of those places where nothing happens, therefore something should happen. But like so many things are happening in this game, it's fine for there to be like something did happen. Like
also, I think the nature of the rock paper scissors fighting means that the double pinch is extra information for the next round. Do you know what I mean? There is something has happened. I have learned that we both want to pinch.
Yeah.
Which is a sort of like, okay, this now means that the value proposition of thumping you has changed, and you know that as well. It does a thing. It's not a total.
Yeah, that's fair. It adds to the mind games, even if it doesn't change the game state. On the table.
And I think that it like. Background-wise, two boys. There are so many cartoons of two people simultaneously robbing each other. Do you know what I mean? It's like
like the visuals of it never bothered me. It was simply the mathematical no-op. But again, like it doesn't bother me that much. It's just that it had come up a few times, and I thought, well, let me see if I can explore something. But I think that my logic is correct that you have to change pinch fundamentally, and changing pinch fundamentally to anything else seems really sad because pinch is so elegant and so easy to understand. And like understanding the rock, paper, scissors thing whilst mapping new rock, paper, scissors into your brain and remembering the relationships, like everything needs to be really simple around that so that you don't have any kind of...
Yeah, it's like the theoretical problem is two infinitely stubborn players infinitely pinching and just forever and ever and ever. And then it's one of those things where it's like, I mean, honestly, if you're in that position, you're both an arse and you're an idiot.
Because you're not advancing towards winning.
Well, after 5 or 6 double...
It's not like some infinite combo in Magic.
No, after 5 or 6 repeated pinches that you're still like, I'm still not going to thump. I know that thumping is now a superior choice.
Yeah.
It's guaranteed that it's a superior choice, and I'm still not going to take it. It's kind of like, okay, at that point, I don't think I can legislate for how much of a stubborn idiot you are.
Yeah. You know? So I think I'm just going to drop that problem as... I'm just going to accept that as like, it's one of those places where you've got to make a choice. There's a compromise to be made. I'm going to make a compromise against the no-op and in favour of the elegance of the system.
And like I say, I immediately had a problem with the 1-inch place of a cap. because there is no other like way you can specifically place caps in a very specific position.
Yeah.
And like I say, if I
Well, no. When you wipe out a truck, it happens as well. So there are places where that rule has been included, and I was sort of intrigued about including it in some other places. But a vehicle is much bigger and has a lot more space, so like much less likely to run into that problem where like there's 3 guys around me and I'm stood next to a wall and there's literally nowhere to put the cap.
Yeah, there's that. There's also, like I say, a slightly weird thing happens if you stack caps at that point.
Yeah, actually, that's come up as well. I added a line yesterday, but it might be something that needs to go in the municipal code rather than the main rules, which is like when you loot a cap, you pick up that cap and any cap that it's touching, so they become like a contiguous cap blob that you collect.
Okay.
Because when you drop caps, they quite often end up like that. And
Yeah.
so I've just been going blah, but that's just like Mike makes rule up that isn't
Yes.
actually in rulebook.
Put in rulebook.
Yeah, whereas you're supposed to like, yeah, because I'm not touching the top one. But yeah, contiguous cap blob, I think is the answer to that. Yeah. But in general, that one's, yeah. So then the similar one then is the putting the boot in one, which, again, probably not even a problem. But like, he's down, I run over, I put the boot in, currently I steal it. Do I instead have to like put it near me and then turn around and then come back and stuff? Which like doesn't really do anything because I can get there and back in a single movement.
I think generally in that one, a better rule is that the guy who's had the boot put into him gets a little free movement.
Oh, right, yeah. So instead of that suggestion of like you get booted away, you're like, oh no.
Yeah, I mean, it both makes more sense, like, thematically, that he's, like, crawling off.
Mm-hmm.
It solves the thing of you being able to boot infinitely, because you still have to walk in between boots, and so your dice tower might fall over. It avoids the thing of, because I say booting caps out of people, I don't like the fact that it's backing up the game state again. You know what I mean? That the cap starts on the table, it returns to the table is, you know.
Yeah, I mean, it's in some regards it's moving the game state back. In a very real way, it's moving the game state back, but in another way, it's creating an emergent tactical question. But I don't know that that's interesting enough given the speed of the game.
To me, the cap being booted out feels more like, you know, it's like literally if that's where that cap was picked up from, and it gets put back in literally the place it was picked up from, that feels very much like the game state is being sort of reset. Whereas the other Git sort of crawling away doesn't, to me, feel like that, although it has the same sort of it's functionally identical to booting the cap out of them.
Yeah.
It to me feels like it makes more sense, and it doesn't feel like the game state is essentially being reset.
Yeah, I think that's fine. I was going to say it's the only place where you scoot without a dice, but that's not true. There's a couple of special abilities where like you get to push towards an object, so I think that is fine. Yeah, so you just like push the model 2 inches in any direction.
And the thing of like the thing of like booting the cap out of them, then having to go over and pick the cap up and then go back again and boot them in, that to me that move just feels like such a fag.
Yeah,
It
completely.
feels like such a sort of like
It's a faff, and it's like imminently completable, and when you don't complete it, it would just be irritating. So yeah, it's not a fun rule. I mean, the moving away, yeah, I mean, it's easy as pie to move back in, so it doesn't really change the mathematics of being a cash machine, but it's moving the game around.
And also, part of the thing with this guy's issue is that he needs help from his buddies.
Yeah, so you get to
So
make
as he's crawling towards his mates and his mates are running towards him, you're feeling like, well, at least this is shortening how long is a cash machine for.
Yeah, if this guy's got a long tower, then, you know, I might have crawled over, then got hit by a machine gun or something. And suddenly I've got a big tower, and now it's a question to go and do the cash machine. Whereas if he was there, it was just like a freebie move that I didn't have to make any decisions about.
And there's an interesting question, how movement, particularly this downed crawling movement, works in relation to terrain, actually. Because if he goes, then suddenly it's a real thing for this guy to be able to boot him again.
Yeah, I don't know.
But yeah, just generally, it's like, you know, if this guy, if this is the situation, then like caps pouring out of this guy not being able to move feels a lot more pain. You know, he's trying to come in and help. Feels a lot more painful than this, you know, sort of thing.
Yeah, agreed.
You know, that guy feels like, well, I guess I'm getting free towerless movement as payback for my caps being booted out of me.
Yeah, that feels good.
This guy's like stacking up dice as he's chasing after me, and this guy's coming in to save me and shoot him, and he's going to be in a worse position when this guy finally arrives because of it.
Yeah.
Feels, to me, means that he will feel less helpless about the situation.
Yeah, and I hadn't included a like down and not out crawling mechanic because it felt like, so I was thinking about it last night because I was playing Night Rain and there's a down and not out crawling mechanic in that, and I was thinking, well, the only way to do it would be to like have an activation which is not an activation because you're not allowed to activate a downed orc because otherwise the end of the game trigger breaks. But this is a great emergent way of having that crawling mechanic, so I like it a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, that's in. So we'll have a 2-inch crawl. And then cover. So I wrote the game without any cover rules, and that sort of made people cross or thoughtful. So that guy currently can't shoot that guy because there's a box in the way, so the bullet would hit the box. The suggested cover rule, which I thought was fine, is the box is in the way, that person gets +1 toughness, but it ignores the thing. The problem is I have to write some like weird keyword bullshit where like this is a piece of terrain and this is not a piece of terrain, but they're both low and therefore the bullet can transfer over it, versus like this, which isn't low but is a piece of terrain.
What is low? How you define low?
Yeah, and then like is an incredibly tall tower of dice in fact a low obstacle that like it becomes really irritating really quickly.
Yeah, can orcs, do the dice have a physical existence in the orcs world? And does that relate to the height of other bits of terrain? Just
so like
so weird and meta.
Yeah. I found a simpler rule in my notes from earlier, which was like the bullet is travelling in this direction. If the bullet is odd, it strikes the first piece of terrain. If it's even, it gets to ignore all the terrain and just hits the first model.
The thing is, like the things stop when they hit things. It's just so clean.
Mm-hmm.
It's just so clean and neat. And shooting is so sort of chaotic and dependent on where the dice are bouncing. But my feeling is the people who are like, why isn't there cover rules, just feel a bit like, look at the game. It's just not that kind of game. You know what I mean? The idea of like, there is a barrier of a certain height and the orc is actually trying to aim over the barrier and there are differences. It's like he's drunk and he's spraying bullets. He's not like, you know, I can see this guy's shoulder around the thing, or there's a gap in this thing I could shoot through. It's like, that's clearly not how these
Yeah,
operate.
no, it's such a good point. It's such a good point. So maybe I should, pun intended, stick to my guns and just not have a cover rule.
I mean,
this is a perfectly functional cover rule, and what I like is that it really crisply interacts with all the other parts of the game. Like, it clearly ignores dice because they're not terrain. It clearly interacts with exploding barrels because if it hits the first thing that's hit is an exploding barrel, then we're in good shape. Like, it still gives you a 50% shot of shooting like through an entire building, which is weird.
I mean, it feels like, sort of consider the height of the terrain and the line of sight.
Totally.
And then dice that roll a certain percentage prime number, and
and also, I guess one thing is that like it's quite unusual for needing a utterly clear line of fire to be a thing, but the position of the dice, meaning making it clear where the bullet goes, like in a way that already more elegantly maps terrain, because this dice is not blocked by terrain, this dice is blocked by terrain. Because they are partially covered by terrain, you have an emergent cover rule, which is almost like better and clearer than any possible modifier.
And also the rule that...
So there is a cover rule, it's right there.
And also the rule that, like, odds hit or evens don't hit, or vice versa, is it is arbitrary that odds are good and evens are bad, or vice versa, and therefore it is a thing that will be eternally looked up. It is not...
Yeah, totally. The other thing, actually, that's curious about this is that, considering this emergent cover rule where this dice's line is blocked and this dice's line isn't blocked, that's because I've considered this entire game in two-dimensional as a plan. Like, everything about this game is a two-dimensional plan. Like, people keep trying to put climbing rules in, and it's like, I get it, but, like, the game simply doesn't function on 3 dimensions. It's an entirely two-dimensional game.
Yeah.
And so this cover rule, where this idea that this barrel is low enough to only cover the model's lower half, and therefore I should be able to see it and shoot it, and therefore the bullet should sometimes pass over, is because they're looking at it in 3 dimensions and saying, well, there's height to these things, and so far every part of this game says no, this is a 2-dimensional game.
Yeah, I feel...
So yeah, I think the cover rules, however I write them, are both unneeded and betray the 2-dimensional spirit of the game.
Yeah, I think it's not in the spirit of the game. I think that doing it well needs to bring in such a set of other terrain-defining, line-of-sight suggesting things.
Do you know what it is as well? Like, part of the way that I wrote this game was because I've been playing quite a lot, like 2 years or 18 months ago, I've been playing quite a lot of like classic Doom. Right. Which is which is like 2-dimensional, even though it pretends to not be. And so when you like try and shoot something, like you can't because the bullet travels an entirely like straight line. You can't aim up or down.
Yeah.
So if you shoot the soldier and he's behind the barrel, then you shoot the barrel.
Yeah.
Okay, that's great. That eliminates another thing to consider. The last one to talk about before we set up a game is the clank bot and the clank rule. And I think you made a comment that was interesting to me, because I've been sort of thinking, I don't have a tank to hand, we'll call this a tank. So I was thinking about the problem, because there's 2 places where the problem emerges. One is I have spent loads of money on a tank, and that's basically my whole gang. And if you've got like 3 little guys, or like 3, I was playing a tank versus like 3 or 4 motorbikes, I think. I think the caps work out, I can't remember. And I was like, well, this is lame, because every turn I get an action with a tank, and you get an action with a not tank, and then I get another tank, and you get another not tank, and it's just super unfair. So that was one thing. And then the other was that like I had this clank bot and I wanted it to feel like, a really lumbering piece. It's powerful, it can carry more weapons, and therefore it was the same with the tank, insofar as like I didn't want you to just, because you're not forced to activate all your models, you can just keep walking, the walking tank around. And honestly, I don't know why I put in he can self-right himself. Like, for the life of me, I can't remember the like logic that got me to that point. I think it was mostly a thematic thing, which is like, GITS can't like lift him up, he's too heavy or something. but I think it was partly because like, oh, maybe there's a situation where you only have a dreadnought and like the dreadnought falling over shouldn't like end your own game. And then you were like, why? And I was like, I don't know why that shouldn't trigger the being lost. Like, then it's a fun challenge to be like, well, I bought a big expensive model, it gets lots of power, but like it's, you know, I've got to babysit it because if it falls over.
Well, also it felt so arbitrary that it's like, well, you might only have one clank bot because they're 10 cans. As I said, a bulwark is 7 caps. If it's possible to only have one clank bot, it's surely possible to only have one bulwark. But
and anyway, like, you know, you're probably playing with 25 caps, and so like you're gonna have some other stuff as well. I was actually more thinking about the tank when I made that comment, because it's possible to have just a tank as your, like, that's way more feasible.
Yeah, again, it's like you say, the problem is that having just one tank is very powerful, and the problem is that having just one tank is very weak. Feels self-balancing. You're like, oh, I've got to allow it to boot up, because if it goes down...
Yeah, and the tank has the additional problem that, like, vehicles are functionally immortal until the timer goes.
Yeah, because they don't...
Because they wipe out, but they don't actually get wrecked until the timer goes.
Yeah.
In the same way that, like, GITS don't. And I could find a way of fixing that problem, but I don't think it's worth fixing. In the case of the tank, it means you've got, like, in an urban setting, a functionally immortal tank. That's absolutely fine. The question is how do you balance the raw power of that?
I think but all the vehicles are functionally immortal.
That's right.
So if you've got a tank with multiple bikes, and you win the game by picking up caps that are scattered all over the table, having one thing versus having lots of things, again, you can't kill my bikes. They can pick up cans more quickly and easily because they're in lots of different places.
Yeah.
Again, feels like, I mean, bully for you that you can wipe out my bikes a lot.
Yeah, and like, you can skillfully win that game by driving like a boss and getting a lot of caps because you never crash into terrain and, you know, blah blah blah. So there's definitely a skill element.
Because attack power doesn't win you the game.
That's right, yeah.
And specifically when you're against vehicles, attack power is essentially, I can inconvenience you occasionally.
Yeah, it's just slowing you down.
It's like, I mean, it's fine. You're never going to get around these caps in the way that I am.
So that's an interesting thing. So, okay, so I'm just going to park that thought, the functionally immortal thing, for a second. So then the simplification of the clank bot, and thus the clank rule in general, is what I've suggested is simply, I can't remember the exact wording of it, but it's basically, if you activated a clank bot, the next activation you can't activate that clank bot.
I mean,
and if it's the only thing you have to activate, then you have to pass.
If part of the thing is all clank bots are meant to feel like lumbering and whatnot, why is that not solved by them having fewer movement dice?
Because they don't get fewer gun dice. Like I can't remember if they do have slower movement. They might, but like the problem is the offensive output, really. That I'm solving for, or my concern is for the offensive output, because they can carry a lot more guns. Clank bot, yeah, he already has a 2d6 rather than a 3d6 move. So he is already more clanking.
Yeah, the fact that if you only have one clank bot, anything that forces you to miss a go is something that I'm instantly like, that's a bit smelly. You know what I mean?
Yes. But it would only force you to miss a go if you had no other models standing up.
I understand that, but it still will sometimes force you to miss a go. And I don't like a game that says sometimes you miss a go.
Yeah, I mean, the clank mechanic in general is a miss-a-go mechanic because I'm trying to limit the offensive output. And so maybe... I mean, I've already got a limit on the offensive output insofar as... Do I still have these rules? Do I still have remove and fire? Yes, we've got slow reload on some of the powerful weapons.
Yeah.
So it could be... It could be that like the clank bot always gets slow reload on everything, and therefore or the tank does as well.
So the issue with the clank bot is that it can carry two-handed weapons. Essentially, is that the extra offensive output that it gets?
So it's got a really strong headbutt. It can hold two-handed weapons. And so it could have, if you were spending the money, it could have like two rattle cannons or two mega blasters. So, you know, I could be pumping out like 10d6 every time I activate. And so it's that like, if I concentrate the points into a single model, like then buy absolute trash to surround it. But I only ever but I only really need to activate this one piece, and I can always activate it with like a strength of your entire combined gang. Then it just becomes like, well, that's obviously the way that you build gangs in Space Kids. It's just better. So it needs a control mechanism, and normally this would be controlled by the activation system, but like. Yeah. You only get one go each turn, and I am militantly not changing that because I think it's super fun. It just has this. It has this spicy bit where the more powerful the model, the more extreme the problem.
Okay, so I mean, if there's a build rule where the clank bot has to take one melee weapon and one shooting weapon because an orc would never turn up without a buzzsaw or a power claw or something. How much does that like leaven the problem?
I mean, to a degree, it does. I dislike the control on kit bashing. Like I've got little dreadnoughts with double guns. And, you know, if I'm taking two flamethrowers, like, because I think that's cool, like, it's not actually that big a problem, and, you know, you'll be quite powerful, but it's not this, like, core problem. The slow reload thing is on the... Oh, no, the rattle cannon doesn't have slow reload. The Mega Blaster and the rocket launcher do. So let me just remind myself of the specifics of slow reload. So slow reload. Yeah, it's basically you get a token next time you.
Is there a potentially fun thing that's a rule that can apply to everybody where if you're firing two guns at once, something dumb happens because it's hard firing two guns simultaneously? I mean, usually when you get, like, you know, two guns in 40k, you have advanced targeting things that, like, you know, aligns them and whatnot, and one assumes these guys don't. And, like...
Yeah, and you'd quite often be like, gunfighter, -1. Yeah, shoot with two, but -1 ballistic skill or something.
Simultaneously firing two guns, particularly simultaneously, like, firing two guns at two different targets, is insanely hard to do in reality. Is there a controlling thing where it's like, well, if you're firing two guns, fun, dumb shit occurs?
Yeah, I don't know. It just feels like, yeah, I don't really want to fuck with the shooting system too much more because I think it does what it does. I mean, it might just be that like the rattle cannon is too strong and it needs slow reload, and it just does for everyone because a dude carrying a rattle cannon, regardless of whether they're a clank bot, is going to be a bit of a pain. I don't know.
I mean, I assume you don't want to be like, that I don't care if you've modelled 2 rattle cannons on because you enjoy modelling on 2 rattle cannons. He's still only got 1 rattle cannon. I assume you want to be like the kit.
I mean, you can pay your money, so like, yeah. It wouldn't fit the rest of the. I mean, if really all my problem is that like when you give a powerful weapon, when you give the rattle cannon specifically, I think it is just that the rattle cannon's slightly too strong, and that's the strongest place to put it, to put 2 of them. So like a regular git, like a regular git carrying a rattle cannon is strong offensively, but at least like is slightly more easy to bring down. Whereas this guy is toughness 5, so it's quite hard to put damage dice on.
I mean, because there are like various upgrades that let normal gits carry 2-handed weapons as 1-handed weapons, isn't there?
Yeah, you can get an injury that gets you a 3rd arm.
Is there any way
of somebody
that doesn't have Clank carrying 2 rattle cannons?
I mean, even if there was, then putting slow reload on it would still be the solution.
Yeah, I agree. I'm just like, my point there is, if Clank is meant to be the solution for this, and this can occur when you don't have Clank clearly isn't a solution for this.
Bionic arm 2 caps. If this git is modelled with a mechanical arm of some sort, the git can count one of their 2-handed weapons as needing only 1 hand. So you can only buy that once.
And there's no other thing, because I thought there was a thing of like big orcs could count something.
Oh yeah, of course. Bully orc can. Bull orcs have got. Yeah, bull orcs can carry 2-handed weapons in 1 hand, so they've already got the problem. So they can have 2 rattle cannons for 6.
Yeah, so a bull orc doesn't have Clank and can have 2 rattle cannons.
Yeah, so Clank is not the solution.
Yeah, Clank isn't fixing that problem of somebody having insane damage output. It's just making Clank bots worse.
Yeah, well, it's intended to make them feel lumbering, which the lowered movement dice already does.
Yeah,
but like they move more slowly.
Yeah, the movement dice is what makes them feel lumbering and slow in a fun way. Clank makes them feel lumbering and slow in an irritating and unfun way. The only thing then that Clank is fixing that isn't fixed by a more fun and non-exceptional feature of the game is the damage output, which it doesn't fix for bull orcs.
Yeah.
The damage output needs to be fixed by tweaking the weapons, making rattle cannons more expensive, making rattle cannons fire more slowly, making rattle cannons weaker, whatever it happens to be.
Yeah.
And then Clank basically can just be thrown out as a rule.
Yep, that seems right. That's good. And then you don't have any more miss-a-goes other than if you've got a slow reload weapon and you've chosen to unload it, now you're going to have to choose to do something else with your next activation.
You can still move and boot people and do close
combat. And the guy with 2 rattle cannons can decide whether to like mega blast and then like they have a smoking cooldown, or fire 1 and then next turn move and fire another one. And
yeah, because you auto reload. Right. Yeah, so you can fire 1 rattle cannon per turn or have a burnout turn of rattle cannon. So those are all fun, emergent, tactical choices to make if you're carrying 2 rattle cannons.
Yeah. And again, like the slow reload thing, currently I've done it with my token method, but it could just be like it's called cooldown and you can't shoot it like in your next activation.
Yeah.
It's just that's much of a muchness. I just use tokens because that gives you something to remember it by.
Yeah, because Clank is an exception rule that sometimes results in unfunness.
All right. So whilst we're on the topic, so the functional immortality of vehicles. So I guess the question is, as a smart player, do you ever build a gang without at least a motorcycle in? Because a motorcycle gives you functional immortality for your entire gang. That's the problem that only just occurred to me. So I can be eliminated by you knocking all of my guys down, unless I've got a motorbike at the cost of like 5 cans or whatever it is.
Right.
So is it just a 5-can tax that if you don't take a guy on a motorbike, you are just shooting yourself in the foot?
So...
Does that point at a fundamental issue?
Can vehicles boot people?
No. So I can never be eliminated, but I can also never recover my guys.
So the game is at that point the game is sort of a lot less fun. I've got like way fewer things. I've got the cheapest, weakest thing that I bought just for the functional immortality. Yeah, that feels like a bad like emergent situation.
Yeah,
but
definitely.
Yeah, totally. You kind of should always do it because if the other guy hasn't got a motorbike, then you can sort of default win the game by grinding him down to eliminate him. So what when the game ends, when motorbikes would wipe out, they like blow up or something?
Yeah, once the timer's gone, exactly that.
And before the timer's gone, they never ever ever blow up.
Yeah, they wipe out, and they like... So, I mean, wipeouts are quite bad. They drop D3 caps, you get flipped and moved through the air, and then you take some... And then you take some damage. So it's basically like a drop some caps, heal up.
Yeah. So all vehicles have to have a crew member bought with them and separately.
Yeah, so you'd buy a goblin for 4 and then give him a motorbike for 5. I think that's the minimum.
Is it just an annoying and won't be represented in a pleasing way by the miniatures on the table thing that when you wipe out, the driver falls out?
Interesting.
Because if there's an option that when you wipe out the driver falls out, and then you can just run up and kick the living shit out of that goblin before he can get back into his vehicle.
Yeah, that's interesting. So like, I'm sort of thinking about like horse combat where like you can fight a knight and then you knock him off his horse and then like it's a big fucking deal for him to get back on his horse. So in this case, it's like whenever you wipe out, you like everybody falls out, including the driver, and you have to put them in play, and then maybe he can like be booted back up on his feet and then walk over and get in the vehicle or something. And
then the realm of extra rules that could potentially be fun and interesting is like, is there like a carjacking element of, you know, if you've gotten the cheapest, shittiest guy and put him into a motorbike, is there a point where my bullock goes yoink and goes off with your vehicle? Obviously, that ends up being a whole bunch of extra rules. It feels like those sorts of extra rules that potentially need to
but this is interesting because I said that one of the things I wanted to tackle was the vehicle fighting system, and that suggests that this game is never about you punching the tires of a car. It's always about you trying to rip the driver out, and it's a fight between, you know, people on the ground and the orcs that are in the vehicle.
Because it feels like if you're fighting a vehicle in either of these positions, you are extremely vulnerable. If you're fighting this vehicle in this position, he's very vulnerable. You know, because all he wants to do is get away. He can't hurt you at this point because obviously vehicles can't hurt you if you're stood next to them. You're trying to rip him out of his vehicle and get a free, lovely vehicle upgrade. He's desperately trying to hold the doors shut and gun the car away so that you can't get a hold of him.
I mean, I think like if your driver always has to have a standing representation, then you end up with some nice possibilities where the vehicle. See, then the question is like, is the vehicle suffering damage and is the person suffering damage, or does the vehicle always suffer damage? And then when the vehicle essentially takes too much damage, then they get blown out of the vehicle.
Because it also sort of potentially answers the question of like, oh, tanks are really powerful and everything, where it's like, yeah, but they have a huge weak spot, which is the, squishy greenling driving it. If you put all of your points into one massive tank and I run up to it and pull the driver out and take over it, and you're just like, oh shit, now is that fun? Is that interesting? Is that just unpleasant?
Yeah.
Because it feels like the chaotic Grand Theft Auto style solution is that, well, of course I can nick your car off you,
It definitely does, yeah.
It feels like the sort of thing that if it can be done in a fun, elegant way, definitely is like, well, this is so much fun. This is so much like... Because Harlequins in 40k used to be able to nick your vehicle. Way back in whatever 3rd edition or something. It feels zany and on brand, to me anyway, that you can and it would stop people just obviously sticking Gretchens into tanks. It would mean you're like, well, I still want the guy driving the tank to be beefy enough to defend himself, because the first thing you're going to do with my tank is try and run a bullock up to it and pull the Gretchen out by his ears.
Yeah.
But obviously that's a whole bunch of extra rules overhead.
Yeah, I mean, it isn't. Like, I have to write, I've got 2 pages of Wipeout and getting wrecked. That could be, and 2 pages of fighting and 1 page of fighting a vehicle. So I've got 3 pages of rules. Those 3 pages could be a different 3 pages, which just involve the vehicle, because the vehicle could be functionally immortal if it's a double-edged sword, and yeah, great, it's functionally immortal, but now that you're out of it, I can get in it. That's a fun reason for the vehicle to always in play, because for the 35 minutes that the game happens, the vehicle is always available for chaos and carnage. Great. It doesn't get blown up, that's good. Sometimes it becomes irrelevant, but or maybe and that would be fine, and maybe occasionally it explodes hilariously and everyone's having a good time and we take it off the table in a big ball of fire. That's fine too. But I guess what I'm trying to say there is, I'm thinking about the problem of where does damage get assigned, and if I'm not really recording damage on the vehicle, even though that's a bit weird, but I'm always recording damage on the driver, then that's fine if the point of this system becomes, well, we want to know whether the driver is still driving and in the vehicle, and as soon as he's not, that becomes an interesting question for everybody else.
So when you're fighting, the damage option is thumping.
Mm-hmm.
So is it that, well, pushing when you're fighting a vehicle is pushing the guy out of the vehicle? Yeah,
shove them out, rip them out.
Yeah, so obviously thumping is you trying to, kick the wheels off, so that goes onto the vehicle. Pushing obviously goes onto the driver because you're trying to push him out of the vehicle, you're not trying to flip a tank. And then once he's out of the vehicle, obviously damage goes on the vehicle, and if the vehicle is just a vehicle, damage just goes on the vehicle, and all shooting damage goes against the vehicle. Because that feels intuitively like what will happen.
Yeah, I guess essentially what matters is there are 2 ways to get the guy out of the vehicle. You either run up and pull him out, or you shoot the vehicle such that it wipes out / explodes / flips, whatever, and he falls out as a result of the wipeout. And the wipeout system is, a sort of light Gaslands analog insofar as if you drive poorly and smash into things and stuff, like you're gathering dice at the back of your vehicle and therefore you're more likely to knock them over and wipe out. So it's kind of the same because either I could punch in order to build up your dice tower, and then you're gonna fail to move and fall out later, or I can just go ahead and pull you out, and that's kind of my decision, and that sort of feels the same as thump or shove normally is in fight. Like I can either directly force you to move and fall over, or I can put damage things on to sort of indirectly maybe cause you to drop the tower.
Yeah, and presumably the driver has the same set of options, but versus a standing orc.
Yeah, because I'd been thinking about it way more like both collisions in Gaslands and like the abstracted vehicle combat in Warhammer 40,000, insofar as like a vehicle has weaponed attacks, which is like, I'm crashing into you, I'm nudging you, whereas a fight being triggered could be, much more like Mad Max Fury Road, where like, okay, the reason that we're resolving a fight is I am jumping up onto the vehicle and we're punching through the window and I'm trying to get my sawn-off shotgun, and it's that moment of cinematic combat rather than the collisions, which is kind of modelled in another way.
Yeah, I mean, at this sort of scale in this sort of game, it seems obvious that, if someone's on a motorbike, they are not welded to the seat, and clearly what I'm going to do is like try and run up and drop kick you clean off the motorbike.
Yeah, the problem I've got is distinguishing between the obvious, like, I just ran into you with a car, versus the slightly less obvious, I drove up to try and, like, punch you as I went past, versus the, like, I ran up to tear you out of the vehicle, versus I ran into the path of a moving vehicle. And it might be that, the front edge is the danger zone, and as long as I'm avoiding the front edge, that's fine.
I mean, is there a way of the vehicle initiating combat against somebody with the sides of the vehicle in this?
I mean, rules as written, yes, but like literally no, because there's no way to drive into someone sideways.
Yeah, so like, when the vehicle is always going to be initiating combat by driving into an orc, and an orc is always going to be initiating combat by running up to the side of the vehicle.
Unless they ran into the front of the vehicle.
Yeah, unless they chose to
run into the front of the vehicle, yeah. So, it does feel like the front of the vehicle is a magic zone. And then the rest of it is different.
Yeah, well, it feels like you can't fight the front bumper of a vehicle. You get run over by a front bumper of a vehicle.
Yeah.
And even if it's this guy piling in, if he's dumb enough to do that, what happens is that he smashes his face into the front, the bull bars in the front of the vehicle, and is a drunken moron who's, because again, simultaneous movement, the vehicle is moving at all points.
Another interesting thing could be that, like, if you run up not touching the magic zone, then that initiates a fight. And then maybe as the controller of the vehicle, I decide which orc on board does the fight, and so that would be an advantage to having a crew member. Like, my driver doesn't have to be fought, but maybe they end up getting thrown off, and now I've got my second guy moves in, and now there's no one to defend. Yeah, so I have to pick a fight with the driver. I have to nominate the driver as the participant.
Absolutely. I think I sort of thought that was a sort of an assumed situation where if you've got multiple crew members, and then crew members can jump out of vehicles and things. So then it's like, well, are you paying for some ablative goblin armor, crew members, or are you like buying somebody who can actually do stuff? And
yeah, I mean, it wasn't clear to me, because so far as soon as you load models into a vehicle, they become a single model called a vehicle, and this pulls that apart a little bit again, and it's like, oh no, this is a go-kart, and when I fight one of the models within the go-kart, I'm not fighting the go-kart itself, unless maybe I am, and it's like, well, sometimes I put damage on the vehicle because that's the only thing that we can record damage on. So it's a little bit. I don't think it's intuitively troublesome. It's just a little bit mechanically.
Yeah, I suppose the
delicate.
The question the source of unfunness is that, like, you know, what happened? This guy activates. He shoves that guy out of the vehicle. That guy activates and just gets back in the vehicle.
Well, no, because I think you would shove them out and they'd have to be fallen down. That's the only way that.
Yeah.
That it makes fun.
Yeah. In that case, I think that's sort of. It solves a functional immortality. It adds a fun bit of chaos in emergence and tactical weirdness.
Yeah, and like, because I have to use a fight action to shove them out, like, you can't just get back in, and it's not my activation, so I'm not going to just get back in. I'm not going to just nick the vehicle immediately. I've got to survive an activation.
Yeah, there needs to be, you know.
Whereas if I wipe out and I'm thrown from the vehicle, then, you know, well, I just like, it could be anyone's activation next, could be my activation next, could be your activation next. I just suffered the.
Yeah, and so the one, like, emotional issue is people hate being killed by their own stuff.
Yeah.
And is that a point where people are like, well, it's time for me to take my medicine. You've stolen my tank.
Maybe. I mean, it's interesting actually, because like, in a campaign setting, I can well imagine this. In a one-off setting, I don't know, but like, there is a place where it's like, no, you can't buy vehicles. What happens is that sometimes vehicles are present in the play area and they are neutral, and it is literally, you know, Grand Theft Auto. And so vehicles aren't part of a list building. But then if you end up in a vehicle at the end of the like game in a campaign, they're like, cool, now you've got a vehicle, blah, blah, blah.
I mean, it's a self-writing scenario.
For sure, yeah.
There's a vehicle in the middle of the table, and the winner is the person who ends up with the vehicle, and the reward for winning the scenario is the vehicle.
Yeah.
And then, you know, I suppose, like, emotionally speaking, if you can constantly have the feeling that the vehicle doesn't belong to you, you're just currently in control of it, it would ease the pain of, I paid a bunch of cans for this, I activated it once, and then some bellend yanked me out of it and is now killing me with it. But again, I think that at that point
I'm not that worried about this element. I think you're right to identify it. I think this game is chaotic enough to guide people to that particular piece of unusual fun. I think I have a little think about it, because like, I don't want people to play vehicles the first few times anyway. So like, there's some ways of suggesting, there's some ways of mechanically making it like I want to let people build vehicles and have fun building vehicles. That's, you know, I want to give people that freedom. I equally want to like help them get to that point of having fun. So if there was a way of like, you know, I don't know, I'll have to have a little think about it. But I think like overall, I think the fun of nicking vehicles and it actually being a Grand Theft Auto game would trump people's negativity around the like, don't touch my model, why are you getting to control my model, that kind of shit.
Yeah, hopefully, because I think that's the emotional question where you're like, you know, now this is mine now, so I get to push it. There are some people who like, don't ever touch my models, you know what I mean, for any reason. Yeah, I
mean, in this game though, like,
no, I understand.
So I think it's like the game itself, the context of the game softens that a lot.
Yeah,
is what I'm saying.
You would have to hope that anybody with that kind of attitude wouldn't be coming to this table, because, like you say,
there's other, yeah. I mean,
and I think
even a game that you have to lay your models down is like crossing a Rubicon.
Yeah, for some people, absolutely. And I think,
and then I have to push it across the like sanded table.
You're playing with like one of my tables that's sand glued to a thing, and just hear the grinding.
And the paint being left in a little stripe behind it.
I imagine, there's got to be a certain sort of player who intentionally does looks at the other person whose skin is crawling as you grind him across the... Yeah, this is how I move him when he's down. Do you like that? This is like nails and chalkboard for you, isn't it?
Yeah. Okay, so that was a productive line of inquiry, because essentially it says the fact that vehicles are function immortal is rubbish, and the funnest solution would seem to be to tackle vehicles in a completely new way. Let the orc be the star. Let the driver be a meaningful component. It comes with the cost of having to have a mounted and unmounted version of my dude, which is in some respects awesome, and in some respects fiddly. But if you build cars like that, then it's fine. And in Gorka Morka, there's quite a lot of swapping who's the gunner and the driver, from game to game and stuff. You have to do that within the rules. Whether anybody ever modelled it is another question.
Yeah, I mean that's it. It feels like the sort of thing that made Gorka Morka the legend it is, and referencing back to that is kind of no bad thing.
Yeah, and I was wondering about the whole boarding party, Fury Road thing, and so I'd gotten to the point where fighting a vehicle was as simple as I could make it within the confines of the existing rule system, and that's what I wanted to test. But I'm much more interested in this idea because it solves actually a aching problem in the middle of the vehicle system, which I had been ignoring.
And it, to my mind, it's complexity that has a fun reward rather than complexity for its own sake. I think the idea of putting in the possibility of carjacking people isn't a fun and attractive thing. Whether it creates a situation where people don't want to take vehicles anymore, but
maybe. I think I wouldn't be super worried about that from a... I guess what I would say is I'm gonna imagine writing scenarios where vehicles are nigh on a requirement, or you get one for free, and having the the Grand Theft Auto there's a few cars scattered around, that's almost like a terrain feature that becomes a game, and there can be a game mode like you suggested. So I think all of that is basically pointing at the fact that I'm not saying that vehicles have to be a thing that you choose, but many other things in this game, they're another delightful jalapeno pepper to just add to the madness.
Yeah, because if it's okay, in a standalone game, maybe only mad people take vehicles for the sheer joy of it, but they're there in the campaign, and they're there in certain scenarios when they're there in the campaign.
Yeah, and they are very powerful, and you get to use them for a few activations before you get pulled out. So you're going to be able to wander around with your frankly discount heavy weapons, causing some chaos. So then the question is, can I pull you down to level the field before you absolutely trounce me? And they move fast, so they can collect caps and stuff. So without having done the playtesting of this pulling out of the driver thing, it feels it feels intuitively like there's enough advantages to having a vehicle anyway. The functional immortality was just a brutal, power jump that I hadn't spotted.
Yeah. And also it feels like the sort of rule that when you read it in Space Gits, you'll feel well, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Of course you can.
Yeah, and I've wanted to put Grand Theft Auto stuff into Gaslands forever, but because it doesn't have pedestrians, it doesn't make any sense. So of all the possible routes to go, something that allows me to carjack is the best of all possible worlds, as long as I can get it simple enough. And the fact that the fighting system already has grab and pull, it's perfect.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
It's the moment.
It feels in many ways the obvious solution.
Yeah.
Because I think one of the things that's sort of in my mind is that the costs of things don't feel like they're going to get, as heavy a playtesting as they
Correct.
beneficially could have. So I think
Yeah, and I've been very, very laissez-faire about the costing. Like everything basically costs the same, apart from a couple things that to me look like they have obvious spikes of power. And it's funny because I was chatting to a guy who's big into. I was telling you about this. The crossbow in Necropolis. Like most people aren't going to worry about things most of the time, but there'll be one or two things in this giant list of nonsense that I've created where it's just like, you always take the.
I mean, this is the thing, and funnily enough, I sort of recently put a blog up on this, is that I am of the opinion that the more competitive and tournamenty your game is, the less balanced it needs to be.
Yeah, no, I agree with that whole sentiment. Yeah, we were talking about that on the drive. I completely agree.
And the thing with Space Gits is that
it almost wants to be more balanced so that you can just have a fun time. I mean, I guess so. The two things that I'm most interested to hear from you in this specific area are, rather than the costs for the equipment and fancy gear and thingy, like, are there any pieces of fancy gear that just look too powerful? And then I think I'd rather tone them down than change the costs, if you know what I mean.
I know what you mean, yeah. Sort of looking over it, there are one or two things where I was like, okay, because I had just a quick look over it. There were one or two things that feel like, is that that looks like it's potentially breakable, rather than like, and I think,
and so toning them down or putting a control on them, that would be the thing.
I think.
And then the other thing that I think does matter for the costs specifically is like the costs of the different model types. I'm really not that confident about it. And like, the advantage that you get for a Bulwark, the advantage you get for a Clank bot, like, I think they're ballpark right, but like I'd be interested to see if you'd be like, well, do you know what? I'm never building a Gremlin gang, or I'm always building a Gremlin gang, or something.
Yeah, I mean, so if you just like eyeball the numbers, basically.
Yeah. I mean, they're all. It's just it's evolved over the like. They all have slightly different stats, but like ultimately the utility of a model is high for just existing. Its toughness is probably the biggest differentiator on its cost, and then like the Bulwark having the ability to carry a heavier weapon and another gun, that's nice, but I still have to invest in it. Like it's an option for me to invest in. It's not super like passive value.
Yeah.
But the fact that they've got a one extra toughness means they're taking damage that little bit less.
Yeah. I guess
and they've got a better headbutt, but it doesn't come up that often, particularly when you've got 3 arms.
Yeah. The question is like, it's like, okay, if you get 5 Gretchens for 1 Bulwark and you get like the basic gun for free, and that gun does an average of X many hits, and it's like, well, therefore 5 Gretchens always annihilate the Bulwark without exception,
Yeah, and it's important that like there's no minimum size to the gang technically, but like practically speaking, unless you're buying a tank, you're always getting like 2 or 3 at an absolute minimum. And there is an upper limit because regardless of how many dickheads you buy, you can only deploy 5, except the Gretchen and Norballs allow you to, in total, to add a 6th person.
Yeah, because it feels like the obvious problem would be hoarding.
Yeah, and so hoarding is contained to like you can get a maximum of 6 twats.
Yeah, because of swig dice, basically, isn't it? Because if I've got one guy who's very powerful and you've got 5 guys, my one guy picks up 5 dice
for every activation, for every round of activations. Yeah, exactly.
And so the swig dice puts a big benefit into having more models,
as well as the utility of spreading out and collecting the caps.
Yeah,
without
all those things as well. But it's like if if I've got 5 guys over here and you've got 1 guy over there and they never interact with each other,
which is an interesting corollary to the problem I was saying earlier about concentrated activations in a single powerful piece. The benefit in the other direction is, well, I spent all my caps on this thing that I get to use all the time, and I don't have to let it be idle for even a single activation.
Yeah, I mean, I think I sort of said this on the Discord, where it's like, well, if you've got 1 clank bot and I've got 5 goblins, your clank bot will naturally just fall over of its own volition, while all of my goblins are still in a position where they can't fall. They've still got 1 dice each.
Yeah,
he's already going to probably be on the floor. So that is an inherently self-balancing thing to the single powerful model.
Yes. Yeah.
Option.
Yeah.
So it's like I'm not super worried about the single powerful model option being overpowered thing. I think as much as you are, because of the combination of the fact that you don't win by killing things, you win by picking up caps, and fewer models are worse at picking up more caps no matter what you do, and drunkenness is inevitable. Drunkenness is inevitable in Space Gits, whether you get shot or not.
Yeah.
You will eventually go down. It's like I say, two orcs versus 1 orc. The 2 orcs in Space Gits will pretty much always win, because they'll just keep booting each other. They can just stand there next to each other, just booting each other up, not even shooting at the other guy, just going, eventually you're going to pass out. Eventually you are just going to pass out. Yeah. And then we'll wander over, holding each other up, and kick the living shit out.
Oh, the winning tactic is the friends we made along the way.
Kind of, yeah. In a way, it's like...
Lovely.
Yeah, the booting up and swigging just means that more models are always going to be, I think, a more powerful thing.
Cool.
Because, a buddy makes you immortal in Space Gits, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, and then that's nice because there's a cost to that, which is now you're not splitting up to gather the loot as fast, because you're keeping the party together.
And that's a sort of, a tactical back and forth of how much do I spread my guys, therefore how much can I boot less, but more caps I can pick up. And those things are all emergently nice,
Yeah, plus the fact that even if I want to walk together down the road, it's really hard to do that.
Yes. You're sort of doing the thing of 2 drunks weaving back and forth. And
it all just works.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of things that satisfyingly work correctly in the game in and of itself.
Cool. All right, I actually don't want to play a game of Space Gits. That was so much. I want to think about all of that. That was beautiful. Thanks, my dude.